Is your computer running slower than it should? The culprit might be your RAM. Did you know that insufficient RAM forces your system to rely on slower storage, dragging down performance? But here's the good news. Upgrading your RAM can transform your PC into a speed machine. In this video, I'll break down everything you need to know about RAM, from DRAM and SRAM to DDR4 and dual channel modes. You'll learn how to choose the right RAM, optimize your system, and avoid common mistakes. Ready to boost your computer's performance? Let's dive in and unlock its full potential. RAM memory. In a previous class, we talked about secondary memory, which is permanent storage. This is what concerns hard drives. Now, we're going to talk about main memory, which is temporary storage, and it's called RAM. The word RAM stands for Random Access Memory. In order for a program's data to run, it must first be loaded into RAM. The program data is stored on the hard drive, and it is from there that it is loaded into the RAM. Once the data is loaded into the RAM, then the CPU will be able to access the data to run the program. That's all well and good, but sometimes the RAM isn't enough to load the data. In this case, if the RAM memory is too low and it cannot hold all the data that the CPU needs, then some data will be kept on the hard drive to compensate for the insufficient memory. This can cause some slowness in execution on the program, because instead of the data going from the RAM to the CPU, they have to provide extra work by going back to the hard drive. This also has the effect of slowing down the computer. So, the only solution to solve this problem would be to increase the amount of RAM in the computer so that all the data is loaded into the RAM without the need to constantly access the hard drive. That's why, when you increase the RAM of a PC, you feel that it goes faster. RAM needs a constant power supply to store data, i.e., if it is no longer powered, then all the data stored on it is erased. As we have seen, the RAM is stored on the motherboard in modules called DIMMs, which are available in different memory sizes. They can range from 128 megabytes to more than 64 gigabytes of memory per DIMM. RAM also comes in different types, such as DRAM, Dynamic Random Access Memory, which is dynamic RAM. DRAM is memory that contains capacitors. You can see the capacitor, like a small bucket that stores electricity. Capacitors contain binary information, such as ones and zeros. Remember, it is thanks to binary that computers can read data. Since DRAM works with capacitors, this means that they must be constantly renewed with electricity, as capacitors tend to have some leaks if they do not receive electricity for a long time. And it is because of this cooling of electricity which it needs that it is nicknamed dynamic RAM. Capacitors need to be refreshed dynamically and regularly, otherwise they will forget about the information they hold. We will now move on to SRAM, Static Random Access Memory, which is a static RAM. This memory uses transistors instead of capacitors, so it doesn't need to be refreshed unlike DRAM, which means that it is much faster than DRAM, but it is also very expensive. An example where you might find SRAM is in the memory cache of a processor. Now let's move on to SRAM, Synchronous Dynamic Random Access Memory, which is another type of memory, meaning synchronous DRAM. This type of memory is what is used today in DIMMs. The difference between SRAM and DRAM is mainly speed. Older DRAM technology works asynchronously with the system clock, which means that it runs slower than the system clock, because its signals are not coordinated with it. However, SRAM works in full synchronization with the system clock, which is why it is faster than DRAM. All signals are linked to the system clock for better controlled synchronization. SDRAM PC100, PC133. SDRAM is evaluated at different speeds. For example, an old SDRAM module dating from the 2000s could be labeled PC100. The 100 stands for the speed at which it operates. For PC100, it's 100 MHz. And since SDRAM is only available in 64-bit modules, if you remember the little calculation we did in the previous course, it means that it has an 8-byte bus, because 64 divided by 8 equals 8. So, to determine the total bandwidth, i.e. the speed of the PC100, well, we need to multiply 100 MHz x 8 bytes, which gives 800. So, the total bandwidth for PC100 is 800 megabytes per second. Let's take another example with an SDRAM module in PC133. With this SDRAM module labeled in PC133, if you multiply 133 times 8, it gives 1066. So, the total bandwidth for PC133 is 1066 megabytes per second. RAM DDR, double data rate. As technology advances and processor speeds increase, new RAM technology has had to be developed to keep up with the rapid evolution of computers. This new technology is called DDR, which literally translates to dual data rate. And that's exactly what DDR RAM does, i.e., and it sends double the amount of data on each clock signal compared to RAM that isn't DDR, which makes DDR RAM twice as fast as basic RAM. While DDR-free RAM uses only one side of the clock signal, then DDR RAM uses both the upstream and downstream sides of the clock signal to send data. The RFI is also labeled differently than the non-DDR RAM. That is, instead of including clock speed in its name, like PC133, where the number 133 equals the clock speed, well, DDR uses the total bandwidth instead. For example, a DDR DIMM labeled PC2700, well, the number 2700 is not the clock speed, but rather the bandwidth. The clock speed of the PC2700 is 333 MHz, because if we multiply 333 MHz by 8 bytes, it gives us, as a rounded figure, 2700 megabytes per second, hence the name PC2700. The DDR uses the total bandwidth in its name. Another example is the PC3200, which has a clock speed of 400 MHz, because 400 MHz x 8 bytes hilager 3200 megabyte per second, hence the name PC3200. DDR, DDR2, DDR3, DDR4. The new technology that succeeded DDR is DDR2. DDR2, which is of course faster than DDR, as it allows for higher bus speeds and also uses less power than DDR. A DDR2 DIMM has 240 pins compared to 184 pins for DDR. In DDR2, for example, you can find PC2 3200 and PC2 4200. An even newer technology is called DDR3. DDR3 is twice as fast as DDR2, with a bandwidth of over 12,800 megabyte per second. As with DDR2, a DDR3 DIMM has 240 pins, but the notches of this type of module are different from a DDR2. This means that you can't place a DDR3 module on a slot designed for DDR2. In addition, motherboards are designed to support a certain type of memory, which means that you cannot mix DDR, DDR2, or DDR3 on the same motherboard. And here are some examples of DDR3, like the PC3 8500 and PC3 11800. Dual channel mode. We will now talk about dual channel. To meet the higher demands of processors and much faster memories, a new technology has been developed, which is the dual channel mode, which translates to double channel. This mode requires a pair of identical DIMMs installed on the motherboard. This allows the memory controller to communicate with two DIMMs simultaneously. This increases the speed of access to memory. To work, it is necessary that the motherboard is equipped with dual channel mode. Then, the memory sticks must also be identical in terms of speed, size, and features. And you have to make sure that the DIMMs are inserted in their correct locations, i.e., according to the color code, to activate the dual channel mode. Typically, memory locations are color-coded to help you identify where they should be inserted. For example, in the image, we have 4 dual-channel memory slots. So, for dual-channel mode to work, you need to install a pair of identical DIMMs in the same color slots. In the example, we put a pair of DIMMs in the orange slots. Mode triple channel. There is also a triple channel mode. So, this mode is not very common, and very few motherboards offer this feature. As the name suggests, the triple channel mode allows the memory controller to communicate with 3 DIMMs at the same time. In modern computers, motherboards have a 64-bit architecture. This means that in single channel mode, it can transfer 64 bits of data at a time. In dual channel mode, it's doubled to 128 bits at a time. And in triple channel mode, it's tripled to 192-bit. That's why triple channel mode is only available on a limited number of motherboards, and only some Intel Core i7 processors support triple channel mode. So, here's an example of a triple channel motherboard. On this motherboard, there are 6 memory slots with 2 different colors, black and orange. So, if you are going to install 3 DIMMs on this motherboard, you need to place the DIMMs in the same color-coded slots to enable the triple channel mode. In the example, we stand on the orange rows. The DIMMs must also be identical to each other. Single, double-sided. We are now going to move on to a term that you have probably already heard, which is double-sided memory, or single-sided. So, the term single-sided or double-sided RAM doesn't necessarily refer to the physical location of the memory chips located on those faces. Rather, it refers to the access of these chip groups by the memory controller. For example, double-sided RAM has 2 groups of memory chips. Be careful though, because it doesn't mean that the memory chips are physically located on both sides of the strip either, because the chips can very well be located on both sides, or on only one side of the strip. In fact, the term double-sided means that the memory controller sees these 2 groups of chips separately. That is, he can only access one group at a time, and the term single-sided refers to a single group of memory chips on the stick. So, these chips can be physically located on one or both sides of the memory stick, whether single-sided or double-sided. Since the memory controller can only access one group at a time, this makes single-sided RAM faster than double-sided RAM. ECC, Error Correcting Code. Before we finish the course on memories, we're going to talk about the ECC code, which can be translated as Error Correction Code. This allows you to detect if the data has been correctly processed by the memory stick and if there is a need for a correction. To find out if the strip contains this feature, you can find out by counting the number of chips on the strip. In a non-ECC DIMM, there will be 8 memory chips, but in an ECC module, there will be 9 memory chips. So, most of today's RAM modules are not ECC because with advanced technology, memory errors are much less frequent. This makes non-ECC modules very stable. ECC memory, on the other hand, is mainly used on servers, as they must be operational at all times. It is therefore an additional precaution to protect against any memory error. Without buffer caching. There is also RAM with or without buffer. Buffered RAM allows for better stability by adding a register between the RAM and the memory controller. This registry stores data or buffers it before it is sent to the CPU. This is what adds stability and reliability to computer systems on which many memory modules are installed. It is therefore mainly used to reduce the electrical load on the memory controller, which occurs when a computer uses a lot of memory sticks, for example in servers. SO-DIMM, small outline dual inline memory module. And the last type of RAM that we're going to see is SO-DIMM, which is used on small devices like laptops. SO-DIMMs are about half the size of regular DIMMs. Similar to DIMMs used on desktop computers, SO-DIMMs are also available in different types, such as DDR2, DDR3, and DDR4. So, if you plan to add RAM to your laptop, you need to make sure you install the right type of memory, as the different levels of DDR in SO-DIMMs are not compatible with each other.